Good morning, everybody. It's great to have everyone here. It's I can see several people on the Zoom thing, so that's great. Um, since this is a STEM event, I want to give you guys a little more background on my education and career path for those of you who might be interested. So as I assume is the same with most of you, I was very interested in math, science, engineering, technology when I was in high school. And so after high school, I ended up going to Caltech to study physics for undergraduate. I really loved my experience there, especially the ability to do research over the summer and as part of work study in a lab. And I think that's something really to look into if you're really interested in going to a career path in STEM, is to take advantage of any opportunities to get internships or other work experience in that field. I was really fortunate to be able to have that experience at Caltech. And I think that really helped foster my love of science and being able to do experiments and be able to work in the laboratory. And after that, I ended up going to Harvard for graduate school in applied physics. And that was a fun experience as well. Graduate school, I think, prepares you mostly to be able to solve a set of problems rather than a specific technology, though it does make you an expert in a specific technology. And there I studied nanomaterials, looking at self-assembly of nanoparticles and looking at wetting on nanostructure surfaces. And so that was a fascinating experience, being able to do things that no one had done before, being able to discover new things about physics that was previously unknown, be able to answer some of the really interesting questions. Um, so that was something that I really was glad to be able to have the opportunity to do so. Um, so after Harvard, I ended up going to NIST under an NRC postdoc, and there's a lot of named postdoc positions available out there. A postdoc position, for those of you who aren't familiar, is some 1 to 3 year position that allows you to do some specialized research at a particular institution, typically either at a national laboratory, a federal laboratory, or even more likely in academia. So there you're going beyond graduate school where you were a student taking classes, but also doing research, to doing full-time research there. So that's something that I think is still kind of a prerequisite for taking the graduate school path to a career. So at NIST, for my postdoc, I studied advanced lithography techniques. So mostly that was focused on nanoimprint lithography, looking at how one can replicate really fine structures on the order of like 10 nanometers and over very large areas. So that was kind of something that was another unique experience. So I think as I'm going through undergraduate, graduate school, and postdoc, I'm adding, at least I tried to add a breadth of information and a breadth of research, still kind of all synergistic to my initial focus with the applied physics and the nanomaterials, but definitely trying to add some breadth to that. So after the postdoc at NIST, I switched coasts and came to Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, excuse me, in Washington State, and there I worked for about a decade on mostly on metamaterials for energy efficient windows. So I was looking at, can we develop new technologies that can improve people's lives by allowing them to save energy in terms of heating their homes, making more efficient use of daylight and things like that. So that's really rewarding, being able to use the science and technology that I've learned to be able to do problems of high impact. So after about a decade there, I decided I was interested in doing some new challenges and exploring some other options and some other fields, and ended up coming to Lockheed Martin. So I've been at Lockheed Martin now for a little over 3 years, and I'm in the Revolutionary Technologies programs here. So Revolutionary Technologies program um, is kind of a unique organization at Lockheed Martin. It's mostly focused on really basic R&D, or basic to applied R&D. So there we're looking at trying to solve some of these tough problems by looking at something in literature, trying to convert it to a technology in aerospace. And that's kind of a unique position to have. And it's something that's really aligns well with my background at the National Lab at NIST and in graduate school. So I think that's a really unique option to have. And, since we're trying to solve all these tough problems, there's a lot of tools that we can use, and bio-inspired design is one of those tools. So, try to give a little bit more detail about bio-inspired design and what it entails. And I think some examples are probably best to do it. I mean, generally speaking, bio-inspired design is how can we learn from nature in order to do things. So, for example, color. So, if I want to maybe create a new display with really vibrant colors or something that can be seen in the sunlight, well, I could look in the literature, I could see what's available, or I could try to iterate on what we already have, or I could look out into nature and see how nature does it. You're looking at, peacock feathers or some of these other birds that have really vibrant colors. There's a great deal of insects and spiders, fish, and even some plant life that have very, very vibrant colors. And some of those are created by pigments, but others are created by the microscopic structure in the feathers or the scales or whatever. And that's actually called structural color. And that's a new way of creating structure that can avoid things like heavy metals for pigments and allows you to do things in a new way. Another example that is very much of interest here in the desert is what are called extremophiles. So, for example, if I look at plant or animal life in a desert, for example, like the Saharan silver ant, different desert actually, but how does that ant survive and be able to actually function during the daytime where most other critters are kind of hiding under something? So it turns out the Saharan silver ant has all these little structures, little hairs all over its body, which are sort of prismatic in nature that allow it to reflect a bunch of the heat and actually release heat more efficiently than other creatures. And so maybe that could be of interest for cooling something or whatnot. So there's a lot of really interesting organisms that operate in extreme environments that could be helpful to learning how to solve problems like that. Another example of extremophile is if anyone's been to Yellowstone National Park and seeing the hot springs. Sorry, I lost the word there for a second. Hot springs or the geysers. You can notice in the hot springs all those vibrant colors created by the bacterial mats that are growing there, and these bacteria are growing in really extreme environments. Water's near boiling conditions, and you've got sometimes very acidic conditions. But potentially we can learn from those organisms what they have in terms of their protective structure and how they function in order to maybe solve other problems. If you want to figure out a new way to fly, look at, there's a plethora of birds, insects, and even looking into marine animals for inspiration there. So those are some examples. And so how do you then go about applying bio-inspired design once I've found an organism? So what you first have to do is to break down your question. Say I want to create a new display with a specific color thing. Well, what actual functions do I need in terms of, say, how does the organism modify its color to give you, and that's the color question, or how does an organism protect itself against, say, UV, and that might help you with, creating a color or a display that doesn't fade in UV light. So those types of functional questions are important to being able to understand how you can apply what you've learned from the organism to your problem. And then you have to look more closely at the organism to see what it is, specifically, either is it a chemistry, is it a structure, what part about that organism actually allows you to solve that problem. So that's kind of the key, the thing that you need to learn from looking at those organisms. And you may have to look at a bunch of different organisms, which is actually kind of the fun part, but allows you to, even if you don't come up with an answer, it sometimes gives you a new way of thinking about the problem, which is really fantastic. And it's really helped me kind of connect with nature in sort of a way. So, for example, like last time I was up on the Oregon coast, I was out looking in the tidal pools, and I stood there for like 10 minutes looking at some of this really fascinating iridescent algae. It, it's an algae that's got this structure all over it, I think from diatoms, that gives it this rainbow effect. There's some just really fascinating things out there. So it looks like I am at the 10-minute mark, so I'm going to pause here for questions. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Kyle. Yes, we have received a number of questions. I'll start with a first one. Um, One of the first viewers wanted to know what exactly are nanoparticles?
Okay, so nanoparticles are structures that are something between 0 and 100 nanometers in diameter, which just means that they're about, uh, uh, take a human hair, the cross section of a human hair, they're about 1,000 times smaller than that. And believe it or not, they're in a lot of applications, or a lot of things that you might have. Some people put, some companies put nano silver into washing machines, or actually into clothing to help prevent bacteria from growing there. Um, bac- Nanoparticles are sometimes produced in soot from automobiles, so they are out in the environment as well.
Okay, thank you, Kyle. Another question. As a postdoc, you mentioned that you worked on nano imprint lithography.
Mhm.
Can you please elaborate on your work? What are some applications of that technology?
Okay, so nano imprint lithography has two varieties, but in both cases, it's an embossing technique. So if I take a stamp or a mold and I press it into another soft material, uh, like um, like if you were to just press a stamp into a wax to make a wax seal, like they used to do back in the day, to seal letters. Um, and you can either do that as a hot embossing, where the material solidifies when it's cooled, or you can do a UV treatment to cure it in place. And the applications range from microchip technology, trying to get down to smaller and smaller transistors to allow faster computers to, I mean, there's untold applications for that. Just making very small structures is the goal of that technology.
Okay, I think we have time for, I think, one more question. During your research, how large were the groups that you participated in? What type of scientists were on the team?
Mm. So most of my research was sort of a combination of basic science and applied science. So a lot of that research was small teams, somewhere between 3 and 5. Sometimes there were as many as 10, but typically 5 was a more typical number. Types of scientists, there were physicists, material scientists, chemists, people who did simulation work, so computer scientists to some degree, electrical engineers, kind of a large mix. I tried very hard to get a diverse set of opinions and viewpoints to be able to solve the problems. It usually is the best way to solve problems.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kyle. That's all the time we have now for questions. Just wanted to also personally thank Kyle for being here today. We are colleagues at Lockheed Martin and enjoy working with him and trying to keep up with all the things he's working on. But the most important thing is Kyle's a big Star Wars fan like me. So thank you for your time, Kyle.
All right, thank you so much.